Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, how are you?
Good. So let's get started. We're gonna welcome to our breakout session for the Journey of the Debut Author breakout session. We have with us today Sarah Etter, and she's the award-winning author of the Book of X. We also have with us Madi Sinha, and she's the author of the White Coat Diaries and also a practicing physician. And then we have with us Bill Elenbark, author of I Will Be Okay. So just some rules that have come up here is that you're going to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Be courteous, keep background distractions to a minimum. And I guess speaker view when possible for people that are speaking. So let's get into it. Thank you again for being with us on Saturday morning. And we're going to start with introductions from our authors about themselves, and also basically what their debut book, novels or books are about. So I'll start with how I wrote this out. So Sarah, if you could start us off, please.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for having me. I'm always so happy. I'm a graduate of Rosemond's MFA program in creative writing, so it's always great to come back. And I always love this conference because it always helped me get a better idea of what was going to happen in publishing when I graduated. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I wrote the Book of X on a writing residency in Iceland, which I was awarded. So I went to Iceland for a month and I wrote about 70,000 words in that month. And then I came back and started editing and sending out to agents. It's a surreal sort of feminist novel about the body and trauma. So it's a very different sort of book than commercial fiction. It's more experimental. And I'm really excited to talk about my journey with y'all.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. And Madi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
That's right.
If you could be next, please.
Hi, yeah, my name's Madi Sinha. My book is The White Coat Diaries. It is about a young woman who has just graduated from medical school, Nora, and she is starting her residency at a prestigious hospital in Philadelphia. And she quickly finds herself in over her head. It was much easier to study about diseases in textbooks than it is to actually see patients. And the story is a coming of age story, and it revolves around an ethical dilemma that forces her to decide who she wants to be, both in her career and in her life.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Madi. And Bill, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Bill Elenbark. My novel is called I Will Be Okay. It was released this summer. It's a YA coming of age story about two boys who fall in love, but their families kind of try to tear them apart. And it's a story that I wrote many years ago and then revisited a couple years ago and reshaped the whole thing and added new characters and so it's a different story than I originally wrote, but something that was kind of older. So for all those who are trying to, get published here, keeping at it, remember, there's never a bad idea. You have some good ideas in the past that you can always use again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we're going to get into more specific questions about the book. How we'll do this over the course of the panel is, we'll delve into a specific question. After we do that, we'll leave it open for questions from the audience. We may have quick questions that maybe we won't need follow-up questions, but after that point, if we have a more question-provoking question, we'll have it open to the audience. So let's get started with what genre is your book and what drew you to this genre? We already got into this a little bit, but let's go backwards. And Bill, if you could kind of.
Sure. Yeah, my novel is a YA novel. I think this was the first story I wrote in that genre. Like I said, I started it maybe 10 or so years ago, back when I was in writing college. For some reason, I was just drawn to the writing style of a younger character narrating, and as a result, I kind of started reading it, a ton of YA, even though I'm a little older than the target market, and still to this day, that's pretty much all I read is YA, and all I write, all my other novels that I'm currently working on are all YA.
Okay, and could actually the follow-up question is, would you have any specific advice for authors that are either beginning in that genre, or they maybe have their book ready to go?
Yeah, I think the key, well, the one thing is certainly to read a lot in that genre, so you kind of know, the target market, what other authors and readers are using in their writing styles. But I think a key in YA is just to sort of embody the voice of a young person. The way my writing style is, the emotions are kind of out there on the page, and that's kind of what you are when you're a teenager. You don't have the filters that you have when you get older. So it's, the advice would be to, kind of stay true to that, stay honest to the way a teenager might be dealing with emotions, in a much more raw and a much more, this is the end of the world because this person didn't say hi to me type of way that you don't feel when you're a little older.
That definitely reminds me of being a teenager, that statement right there. So, and I've heard that that's the most difficult thing, to get that voice, because it's difficult to be an adult and kind of remember how that voice is when you're a teenager. But that definitely makes sense. This person didn't say hi to me, my world is over. So let's move to Madi. Same question, what genre is your book, and what drew you to the genre, and what advice would you have for authors wanting to start out in this genre?
So my book is women's fiction, but I didn't actually start out with any genre in mind. I just had a story I wanted to tell, and I just wrote it and didn't really think anything was going to come of it. I was just writing it for me. And when I was finally done and looking for an agent, it was time to pick a genre, right? Sort of like a requirement. You have to be able to sort of like in a nutshell present what your book, what genre your book is in, and kind of, a bullet point what it's about. And I really struggled with that. I actually had worked with a freelance editor who was like, I don't really know either. It's kind of it's an unusual book in that it's a little bit, I don't want to use the word girly, but I'm going to use the word girly. Like, it's a little bit like she's a young woman and she's sort of like coming into her own, and there's, her discovering how to put on makeup and like stuff like that. But then also at the same time, there's like death and gory medical stuff. So it didn't fit neatly into any genre. And we just kind of went with women's fiction because we thought that was sort of like the closest thing. So yeah, that's how I ended up in women's fiction, which is kind of like a weird genre because there's no like dude fiction. There's just regular fiction and women's fiction. So yeah, I was still kind of like, yeah, like I feel like that's a little weird. And I think, genre is important because when readers pick up the book, there is certain expectations built into the genre, right? You pick up a romance book and you're expecting a happily ever after ending. That's sort of like the one and only requirement of a romance novel, is that it ends happily. The two people don't die at the end. That's like definitely against the rules. And with women's fiction, I think there's certain expectations. I don't think my book meets all of those expectations, which makes it a little challenging, but it's the story I wanted to tell, and I'm going to stand by it.
Now, this is what I'm visualizing. I don't know if this is true or not. So maybe you were kind of living this yourself, like, going through medical school, and then you had all these things to say, and that's why you wrote the book. Is that what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I started out thinking like maybe I'll write a memoir, and then I realized that my personal life is like not nearly interesting enough to write a book about. So as I was going through, I was like, oh, this would make an interesting story. And you know, without ever giving any thought to like how I was going to market this book, you know, when I finally finished it, I was just happy to be finished with it. Like it took me like 10 years to write this book. So when I was finally done, I was like, here it is. And then my agent was like, I don't know what to do with this, but I like it, but I don't know what to do with it. So, you know, I'm lucky that it worked out the way it did.
I would like to ask about that. Like, what do you do when an agent says something like, I don't know what to do with this, or that might be a good follow-up question. But Sarah, if you could also answer what genre, more in depth, what genre your book is, and what advice you would have for other authors writing in that genre.
Yeah, you know, I think genre is such an interesting question right now. And it seems to me, maybe I'm not sure if the other panelists will agree, it kind of seems to me as a way we categorize things in order to sell them. Because most authors aren't sitting down saying, I'm going to write surrealism, right? This is sort of the term the market gives me because I wrote a book that's about the female body in a very sort of surreal, kind of strange way. So I do always think genre to me always kind of comes second. And I totally agree with what Madi said. It is, to be called women's fiction is such a question mark to me. Often I get put in the category of literary fiction, and I think I'm more in the sort of European tradition because the book doesn't have a happy ending, right? And I think in America, in order to be kind of categorized as true women's fiction, the women usually overcome or they succeed or they have a happy ending. And so I sort of ended up bucketed into surrealism and into literary fiction because mine is sort of dealing with like death, life, the body in a little bit of a different way. But yeah, I really love the fact that you brought the three of us together because we all have coming of age novels just in completely different worlds. So that's kind of fascinating to me. But I love exactly what my other two really brilliant panelists just said. Just writing the first draft and thinking about this stuff after has been the best thing for me. When I sit down to write a book, I'm not worried about a title, a cover, a genre. I just want to get a first draft out that someone can respond to, because without a first draft, you just have nothing really. It's like vaporware. So I don't know, that's kind of my whole thought on it.
I'm actually also a debut author, and like Madi, it took me about 8 years to write my book. Are the rest of the panelists, does it also take you about like maybe 8 years or 5 years to get that book exactly how you want it to be? Or what is your writing pace like?
Yeah, that's the same for me. For this novel was probably 10 years. First draft wise comes out pretty fast, and I would say to any budding authors, get that first draft just done. Just like Sarah said, just get through that. Don't worry about how good it is, because it's not going to be good. Just get it down on the paper, and then it'll oftentimes take years to sort of mold it into the story you want to tell. You won't get to that immediately, or at least I didn't get to that in the first draft at all.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I would say it really, so oh, go ahead. Sorry, you go.
We're just having some feedback here that happens sometimes on these Zoom meetings. Sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, I was going to say the Book of X, I wrote the first draft in, like I said, about 30 days. One thing I want to add is I work full time. So writing, it's kind of like I get as much time as I can to write. And when I got the writing residency, it was like, don't sleep, don't brush your teeth, wear yoga pants, get as many words out as you can every single day. And so I was writing like a maniac. And I was very lucky because I was in Iceland at a time where the sun was only going down for like 5 hours a day. So it really felt like I was there for like 6 years. And I just like got this first draft out. And then I started to edit, and then I edited for probably 5 years. I mean, it just was like, because I would have an agent look at it, I would take their feedback and work it in. I was looking for publishers, right? It just was something that after you get the first draft, you do want to just keep editing forever. They had to pull this book out of my hands to send it to me. because I would have just kept editing. Right, the minute I knew it was going to the printer, it was like a demon came out of me, and I was like, I must edit the way Faulkner would have edited, right? Like it was like every single page, every sentence, I was picking things up, looking at them. So the jets just got turned on, right? So I've done panels with writers who are like, oh, I edited my book a couple times. I will never stop editing. Like I probably edited this book like 97 times. But I will say something crazy just happened. After the book came out last summer, I was on book tour for about a year and a half. It kept going, and I didn't really write in that time. And my agent said to me before I went on book tour, I was like, I'm gonna get you another manuscript really soon. And he was like, no, you're not. You're gonna go on book tour and you're not gonna write anything. And I was like, I'm different. I'm gonna do it. And he was completely right. I didn't write for probably a year and a half. And then now, I mean, I guess if any silver lining to quarantine, like a whole novel just fell out of me in like a month and a half. And he had been asking for the novel in like March probably. And I kind of started outlining things and thinking them through. And, so I don't know, it kind of comes and goes. Like sometimes I think a book, you have to wrench it out. And other times I think it might just kind of tumble out of you if you're really ready and you haven't written in a while, maybe.
Did you say you were done the book in 30 days for the first draft?
Yes. And
Wow.
I would say there are a couple books about this thought where your first draft, don't think, just do. There's a really good book, I think it's called like the 90-day novel. That's one that a lot of writers secretly use because it's basically just like, just do your first draft. I always compare it to childbirth. It's like when the baby comes out, it's pretty ugly. Like no one wants to hold it. It's covered in gunk. Everyone's like, ew. But then in editing, that's when you're like cleaning the baby up, you're like handing it to its mother, right? In editing, you can fix anything, but you can't fix something if you don't have a draft. Then there's nothing to fix. So yeah, all of our first drafts, not to speak for everyone, are ugly.
No, absolutely. Yeah, if the problem is, I think the problem really is if you are there and you're thinking about an idea and it's been 10 years, that's the problem. So let's open it up for some questions at this point. We have gotten through some initial questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, so no one's being unmuted right now, so it seems like there aren't any questions. Stop me if there are. So let's see. So what was the process of getting an agent like for you?
That's a great one. Who wants to go first?
I could go first. So interestingly, I got the agent, my current agent, on not the novel that is published, but a different novel that didn't end up getting published. She loved that novel, and similar to what Madi said, she didn't know what to do with it. But she loved it and definitely did her best. And in the time she was trying to get that published, I had rewritten and finished I Will Be Okay, which we got published. But I met her at a conference just like one of these up in New York City. I met her and a bunch of agents in one of those speed dating type things, and I had the pitch down for that novel and got a lot of requests and selected her. So that's how it worked for me. So hopefully that works for some of you guys today.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if everyone had a similar experience. So I want to see out of our panelists who actually had a face-to-face versus actually emailing and getting a response back. So Madi, did you actually email someone or did you meet someone in person?
So I met my agent off of a Twitter pitch contest. So for those that are not on Twitter, there's a pretty active writing community on Twitter. I'd never been on Twitter before, but just sort of heard about it and joined expressly for the purpose of trying out one of these pitch contests. So basically what happens is like twice a year, you can post like a little blurb about your book under the hashtag for the contest. And there's a couple of different ones I pitched under something called DV Pit. And on that day, agents and editors are on Twitter looking through that hashtag and like looking at the different proposals for books and ones that they find interesting. And it's an interesting thing to kind of be a part of, because you really have to condense your book down into the Twitter character limit. And kind of be creative in how to do that so that you get interest in your book. So I had several agents that day reach out to me and say they wanted to see a copy of the manuscript, and one of those became my agent that I have now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so that was DV Pit?
Yes. And the other famous one is Pit Mad, and they occur like twice a year at different times during the year, but you can just Google either DV Pit or Pit Mad, and information about it should come up for anybody who wants to try that. I recommend it. It's kind of, even if you don't get an agent, it's just kind of a fun thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, how about you?
My story is kind of a little bit weird, but that's because I write strange books. So just a caveat there, if you're writing experimental work, this might be a little bit more your path. After I came back from Iceland, I edited the book. I sent it to 5 agents that were pretty high up in New York, like 5 really big ones. All 5 of them responded and gave me very thoughtful feedback, which was mostly, this book is beautiful, but it is too messed up for me to sell it. And so, and, you know, because it's true, right? It's a very kind of harrowing, you know, it's an intense book. And so I sort of gave up. I didn't give up, but I just kind of backed off after 5. And I am such a, I realize now after talking to other writers, they have been rejected by like 175 agents or like 57 agents, right? And these are people who are now very, very successful. So the process is can be quite grueling. And then $2 Radio accepted my manuscripts out of the slush pile. And as soon as that happened, they nominated me for the National Book Award, and all of these agents came to me, and I suddenly had, right? So in a matter of a year, I had 5 agents reject me. And then literally 8 months later, I had an inbox full of agents who were like, hey, let's talk. And then I had my pick. So it's kind of weird how it worked for me, because I went from feeling like, oh man, I have no hope. And then all of a sudden I had kind of a buffet. And then I ended up with my current agent, Kent Wolf, who is amazing. And he represents a lot of women who do experimental work. So I feel really, really lucky I ended up in the right place.
That's amazing to hear. Like, so basically one good thing, advice for authors that are starting out, I think, is initially the agents might say they're not interested, you know, but one of the important things is to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a numbers game, to be honest. Like I always tell people, like, there are so many books being published every year, if you really think about the absolute mass number of books being published. And so the only way to increase your odds of finding the right agent is to make a really big list of agents to query that are in your, I mean, obviously be targeted and make them specific. The other thing I would say for people who are looking to break out, don't ignore the mid and the small size presses, Coffee House, Grey Wolf, right? If you're writing something that you really, really believe in, those places will still nominate you for awards. They will give you, you know, full backing, full press pitch. Like there are more options than, you know, just one. And so like, if you're not getting ground with an agent, I think it's okay to query small presses after, you know, you go down that path, right? Because I hear a lot of people come to me and they're like, I got rejected by everyone. And I'm like, well, now let's, you know, keep looking, because a small press or a medium-sized press can do a lot of great work for you that gets you the agent you want in the end.
I'll also just jump in to add my 2 cents on querying, which is that like what I did when I first started was I had like a list, like Sarah did, like 5 or 6 agents that I sent the book out to. And then I really listened to the feedback. I mean, a lot of agents are very generous with their feedback. And when I think it stings to get a rejection letter, but like look past that at the advice that they're giving you. And a lot of the, you know, if everyone's giving you the same advice, then I think you have to consider that. So like for my book, you know, before I got my agent, and this was like draft number 5 or something of my book, and I needed to work on it and didn't know that. So I had sent the book out to, I think like I picked like 10 agents, and like 8 of them said, you know, we like the book, we like the concept, but we feel like we're not connecting with the character enough. And I decided not to keep querying after that, but to go back and to see if there was something that I could work on to make the character more compelling. I ended up rewriting the book like another several times. And then when I had made that book, I mean, the problem is you always think the book is as good as you can make it, right? Like at every stage, like you get to the end of the first draft and you're like, this is great. And then you edit it a few more times and you're like, gosh, now it's ready. And like, it can never end, like Sarah said. But like the feedback that I got from agents made it clear to me that it wasn't where it needed to be. And then after I had rewritten it like a bunch more times, I ended up getting, when I got that offer from the agent that I'm with now, I got like 4 or 5 other agent offers. So, using that feedback I think is valuable, as opposed to just like querying everyone and then you sort of like, you've kind of like dug yourself into a hole if you query like 100 people at once and then they all give you the same feedback and now you have to wait like to query them again, right? So instead of like burning all your opportunities, like I would say like test the water and kind of see what kind of feedback you get.
That's so smart. Just wanted to say I agree with all of that.
Okay, so, and Bill, would you add anything to that?
I agree with exactly what Maddie's saying about the feedback from agents. And feedback all along the process, the editing process is really crucial. If you have friends who are readers or other authors that you can share your work with, you do tend to get similar feedback from multiple people on issues with the book that you probably didn't see when you're writing it because it's clear to you because you wrote it. But when a few other people or an agent or an editor comes back to you and says, oh, this part is not working for me, that's when it's time to take a step back and do the edit that you need to do.
Okay, so do we have any questions about getting an agent, the process for getting an agent at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, so also going along with this question, did you have any specific credentials that helped to get an agent and a book deal? Did you have maybe a large social media following before getting agented, or any specific awards?
I had nothing. I had like, and I still have like a minimal social media following. I had like none of that. So I'll just say that. My questions, my answer's really easy. Yeah, no. Same
here. I had no big following and no credentials. And, one of the things certainly at a lot of these conferences that I've attended is there's always sessions about boosting your social media presence, and probably would have helped my, probably will help my book sales, but at least on the of the ability to get an agent or get the book sold, I think it's just the writing. I think it's just the work, because I didn't have any of that. Maddie didn't have any of that.
Okay, we do actually have a question coming in. Is an agent necessary, or could you go directly to the publisher or self-published?
I can jump in on that one. I think, well, one thing, credentials wise, I had won a chapbook contest after I graduated with my MFA. So my thesis from Rosemont was selected by Deb Olin Unferth and was published on a small press. So I had a little bit of a following, like nothing like 20 million Twitter followers or something like that, but there were a group of people who were familiar with my work. So when I went to the next press, they came with me. And I think that will continue to go. Like they'll follow you for your career kind of. So I think that kind of loyalty can be helpful. I kind of think the publishing industry needs to challenge itself on social media as a platform translating to sales, because most of the time it kind of doesn't. Like you might have 20 million Twitter followers, but how many of them actually buy a book? Like that's kind of a big barrier. And I think we kind of need to shift the conversation a little bit, because the value of the work, I don't think is dependent on social media following. I could be crazy, but I think that's it's a very quick way to cheapen what we're doing. In terms of publishing without an agent, You know, I published the Book of X unagented. I was lucky enough that I got a really good small publisher who gave me a great advance, and they front listed my book, which means I got all the media, I got all the awards attention. They gave me everything that they had in the tank. So I'm sort of like the small press, like I don't know, what do you want to call it? Like the good story, right?
Yeah.
Then that translated into a ton of great things for me. But you do have to be careful. There are many presses who don't give you a huge advance, or they can't give you a lot of backing. One thing you want to do if you're going to go out unagented, make sure you're going to presses that have a history of sending out to awards, treating their authors well. Ask around, email an author who's already worked with them independently without an agent, and ask what their experience was, because they will answer you and they will tell you, like, they treated me really well, or I couldn't get a royalty statement from them. Most small presses are doing their best for the author, but also their margins are very thin. So you need to make sure that if you're going to go the small press route, you're going somewhere that you're going to get taken care of. And if you have someone who can, if you're going to be unagented, if you have someone, like I'm lucky, I have an uncle who's a lawyer, and he could read my contract and tell me specifically what I was getting into. Because the great thing about an agent, and my agent right now, is he scares me because he's so good at reading contracts. Like, he will find one word and be like, no, this is terrible. And I'm like, what? Like, he has this crazy mind. So if you are going to be unagented, try to have someone who can review your contract and explain to you what you're giving away. If it's world rights, you probably don't want to do that if possible, right? Like, you want to give away publishing rights. Also, look out for the rights in translation. You never know. I've had multiple people just find me online and then send me thousands of dollars for like foreign rights that I've had to manage that relationship myself. So the things you want to look for in a contract yourself: world rights, film rights, translation rights, all of those things can lead to a lot of money down the line. Like, let's say you go on a small press and then a year later you end up on a big press. Your small press work becomes much more valuable then. So those are the kinds of things you want to look out for. And if you have someone who is good at reading contracts in your corner, just have them give a look, even if you're unagented.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that 100%. Very important to look at that contract. And wording, even a word can throw the contract off. I definitely agree with that. And I'll just say it is a success story. Everyone on the panel is a success story. It's really motivating to hear everything that you went through first to get the agent, and the Twitter thing, that's like great, like to get an agent through Twitter. I think that's awesome. And I agree with you. I think that makes us purists, maybe. Like, we don't care, like, social media, fine, you have a social media following, but does that mean that the writing is there? It should be about the writing. Make it about the writing. I'm with you on that one for sure. Let's see, now we've got looks like we have a question. What does it feel like to have a book out there?
I can take that, but I'll go first. I would say that it is as thrilling as I thought I would be, and then it's also, like, at the same time, incredibly terrifying. My book just came out 3.5 weeks ago, and it was a really long. The other thing that I'll mention that I feel like I wish somebody had told me, way back, was that the wheels of publishing turn really slowly. So I sold my book in 2018, and it didn't come out until a few weeks ago. So I had this long wait, like this long sort of build up to the release of the book, and it kind of like messed with my head a little bit. It's a long time to wait and sort of anticipate this one thing, and then of course this year the pandemic happened, which made the experience a little bit different than I imagined it would be. But it's still been, still wonderful to have my book out there. I think that the thing that kind of took me by surprise was how anxiety provoking it was in a lot of ways, because this thing that had been private for so long, that was like just mine, all of a sudden is in like every Barnes and Noble in the country. And like, that just is awesome, but also like really weird. And there's the whole like idea of other people judging your work. And this book means a lot to me. It's, like, other than my kids, the thing that I have the strongest feelings about, and then to be judged on it, fortunately like mostly good, but not 100%. That was hard. It was harder than I thought it was going to be. And you know, the thing about reviews is that you're never supposed to, as the author, you're never supposed to publicly acknowledge that you look at your reviews. But the truth is, every author looks at their reviews. Like at some point, you're going to want to know what people are saying.
Who says you're not supposed to read them? I read them all the time.
Like, I feel like, you know, like every writing group I'm in, people are like, why are you looking at them? And I'm like, because I don't
they all look.
know, right? Like everyone looks, but you're never supposed to react, right? You're never supposed to, you can't say anything publicly. And, but the thing, you have the feelings though, right? Like it's gonna affect you. Like if you're even 5% human, like it's going to affect you in some way.
I love what you say, because the process of having a book is like being flipped inside out. You're alone for 10 years with this project that no one else can see, because you have created a puzzle that you're solving by yourself. And then so you're introverted, right? You're contained in this little safe universe, in this little bubble, and it's you in this project. And then publishing comes and is like, let's split you open. And then I want you to go on book tour. I want you to stand beside the product. I want you to answer questions in real time. People are going to ask you about your personal life. People are going to ask if it's based on your life, right? It's like completely two opposite spectrums. It is. And so it is anxiety provoking, and like, if I'm allowed to curse because I'm from Philadelphia, it's kind of a mind fuck, because you go from being this person that just exists in the world to being a public kind of, I want to say commodity almost, right? It's part of capitalism. You have to sell the book. You have to go out and you have to read well. You have to present your work well. You have to, and I think that's something that we don't talk enough about in publishing, is the ability to read well, present your work well. Because I've seen writers who, you know, sell 5 times more than other writers because they're good at reading, they're good at working with the crowd, they're dynamic. That's another panel though. But yeah, everything that Madi said is right. The 2 to 3 months before a book comes out, and I'm friends with some writers who are like pretty famous, it is harrowing for everyone. And I think that's why a lot of writers don't have an ego, is because the process of being published is so insane that it's like very hard to feel like you're always at the top of your game. And yeah, I had pretty great reviews, but it was like I had one mixed review that like I just thought about for weeks, and it just ate at me. And I remember my agent calling me being like, this isn't that bad, like what you're doing, like why are you freaking out, you know? And weirdly enough, the mixed review actually drove sales up more than all the positive reviews and the awards, which is even crazier. So there's a way in which like the controversy in the reviews is kind of good. I don't know.
And I think like, you know, like if you get a mixed review, people are like, oh, that wasn't that bad. But like, to me, that's like somebody saying like, your kid's only a little bit ugly. Like it's still offensive, you know?
Yeah.
This thing means so much to me. You know what I mean?
It was like one negative word, and I swear on my deathbed, I'll say that word out loud. You called my book a little uneven, like, you know?
Yeah, it's like it's hard not to take it that personally, because you know, when I look at my book, I think that it to me represents 10 years of my life, my time away from my kids. You know, like what's more important than that? And then I think reviewers often don't. I mean, and maybe they're not supposed to sort of like take into account your feelings. Your feelings are sort of secondary, and trying to kind of figure out how I was going to deal with that, which I basically don't deal with it, is what I've decided. Like, you know, for my own sanity, I just don't read them anymore. But I had to, you know, I made the mistake of like going there and then realizing how painful that was, and then having to like shut it all down. So that is another reason that I'm not very much on social media anymore, because sometimes, you know, the book just pops up on social media, and sometimes it's very complimentary and sometimes it's mixed. And I've seen a couple like, this wasn't for me type of things. And like, you know, that's fine that people have their opinions. It's just like, for me, it's better if I don't see any of that.
No, absolutely. And I think what this just shows is a book is kind of like a baby. I know my book definitely is. It's difficult. I mean, my book is a memoir, so, you know, it's kind of feels a bit more like that as well.
I'm so brave to write a memoir. Like every fiction writer I know is like, yes, my novel is a memoir, but we're calling it fiction. I'm very similar. Like I'm like, I would never tread into memoir territory. It just scares me. You have all of my respect.
Thank you. And thank goodness I haven't had anyone say, I'm not sure I like the protagonist in this one. So, Bill, did you want to add anything to this before we move on to the next question?
I was just going to say, I kind of had a similar experience as Madi in that it was sold in 2018 and came out this year. For me, it came out in June, right in the middle of the pandemic. So no bookstores were open. So that was kind of surreal because it was wonderful, but then I couldn't like go, into a bookstore and see it until several months later. But, the whole thing was just a wonderful experience. Even the mixed reviews, yeah, I agree. You have to read them and just kind of ignore. At this point, it's out in the world, and just focus on the positive reviews that you're going to get, and be happy that some people are really enjoying it.
I also think this is why we continue to work on multiple projects, because the tail life of a book is so long. So It's like you sell a book and then you're waiting. I was really lucky. I sold mine in September and it came out in May, and it was terrifying because it was so fast. I was like, I had whiplash. And I don't recommend that. Like I would almost prefer the longer, because like I would have been able to spend more time. Like it just happened really quick. But yeah, I would say, I +1 to everything that was said here.
And there's also the weird thing that it's a lot of waiting and then all of a sudden a rush. Like it's waiting, and here's the edited version. I need this back in a week. And, for me, that was like January of this year while I was in Seattle for work. And it was, oh, okay, now you have to work 14-hour days and then write for another 6 hours.
Thank you for bringing that up. One time they made me turn it around in 2 days. And I was like, this is insane. But the thing is, part of this is also kind of related. Something had been happening with printers, where there was a tariff on paper from Canada. And so it was a mad rush to have books printed, and you had to have a scheduled slot. And if you missed your slot, then your book would be pushed back by months. And so last year to have a book go to press, and even now, it's just a very strange, it's more erratic than it used to be, for sure.
So I have some follow-up questions, and there were some questions from the audience. One quick thing, I know we were talking about reviews and support for writers. I just wanted to do a quick plug for a local group that we have. It's called Writers for Writers Philadelphia. And we're so thankful that you took time out Saturday to talk to us at this panel. So if you're interested, it's a group called Writers for Writers Philadelphia on Facebook. It has about 2,000 writers in it, but it's very supportive. And, if you do want to do some pitches for your book, we would love for you to do that. So again, it's Writers for Writers Philadelphia. And there's also a smaller group called Book Buzz Writers for Writers Philadelphia, since you have that Philadelphia connection. Now, the question from the audience before we get far away from it was, this is more of a self-publishing question. They're talking about self-publishing and if you can still get an agent after that. And then there's another question, if you're in a writing group, how did you pick one? And do you think this is valuable? So I don't know how much anyone in the group knows about self-publishing. I just know off the top, one quick thing that I can say about that is I've definitely heard of cases where, someone may be self-published and then all of a sudden they're selling thousands of copies, and then agents get interested in the book.
Yeah, that can totally happen. I've seen it really break both ways. That's kind of the gamble you're taking. If you're able to self-publish and then get a ton of traction, and maybe you hire a publicist or you find yourself selling lots of copies, then an agent can come around. I've also seen it break the other way, where if you've self-published before, they might have less of an interest. I do think we're coming out of that. Like, I think that's becoming less of an issue. But yeah, I think, I don't know. It's a tough, I think it's a really personal decision, and one that like really depends on your situation and what your goals are long term. But I have seen it work both ways.
I just would say with the self-publishing, you really, you have to be ready to self-publish. You have to have the marketing plan ready. You have to have the book cover ready. You have to have the editing and the writing ready. So if you're going to embark in self-publishing, all of those other things that a publisher would tend to and have the expertise for, you would have to have that prepared before deciding to self-publish. That's what I would say. And again, you can get agents interested after that point if you're getting the sales probably. But you know, once you put it out there, it's out there, and you can't really query as this is a new project anymore after that point. And how about book groups? Are people part of book groups, and how do you select a book group? And do you think that this is helpful to the publishing process?
Yeah, I could speak to that. I am in a writing group. I found it in one of my classes that I took up at the New School in Manhattan. Just a bunch of us started hanging out and discussing our own writing, and now, I don't know, at least 10 years later, we're still, most of us are still in a writing group where we share, well, we used to share in person our writing, and now it's all been virtual, but it's a great way, you know, however you can find a group of other writers, it's a great way to get feedback on your writing. It's just, I can't think of a better way to just have a bunch of people read, you know, a couple chapters of your story or your short story that you're trying to publish and give you excellent feedback.
Oh, so you went to the New School. That seems awesome. In New York, right?
Yeah.
So, any other thoughts on book groups?
Yeah, I can go if you want. When I first graduated from Rosemont, I sort of kept two of my classmates because I really loved them. And so they ended up being my first readers for the Book of X, which was good because for a first draft, you kind of want that gentle read where someone's not going to completely roast you and destroy your ability to like keep working on it. So I tend to keep it kind of small. Like I just want 2 or 3 other people who I really trust to read it. And then with this current draft that I'm working on now, I was lucky enough to go on book tour with Tommy Pico for a while, who's a poet. And so he became one of my first readers, as well as Amelia Gray, who does a lot of work in Hollywood. So she was kind of able to read it from like a script standpoint. So I also do have, I'm in a Slack with a bunch of writers, an agent, a couple publishing reporters, and we have an accountability channel. It's like a network, it's like a channel in Slack called Work, and we tell each other what we're going to work on every day, and we hold each other accountable. So when I'm in real drafting mode, I'll wake up and tell them I'm going to write 5,000 words today, and then I have to tell them when I'm done, and they all applaud, you know? So that kind of motivation can be super helpful. Like I would definitely recommend, it's very hard when you leave the kind of beautiful MFA environment where you have lots of deadlines, lots of support. The real test for a writer is when you leave that, how do you bring it into your actual life? How do you bring it into your day-to-day? And having other writers around you, even if it's a small group, is just a huge, huge asset for that.
You know, something that you said is just making me consider, so that feedback that will destroy a writer, when you feel that that's happening, what is a good approach for that? Because like if you're having like, sometimes it's too much, you know, like the negative review can be too much, and we've Rosemont is really supportive. I didn't really see it, but outside of Rosemont, there can be like a very attack kind of stance. So what's the best advice for that? I mean, if it's going to make you stop writing, obviously it's not a good environment to be in.
it's interesting. A good friend of mine who is in my writers group, when she was first workshopping her first writing, she got some really negative feedback from some people in our class, and literally put that work away and didn't revisit it again. And that, I think is a really difficult thing for writers to go through when you're first hearing negative feedback. So I would only say, obviously in a class environment, you're going to get some negative, some people who are just not, for whatever reason, not into your story, and you just got to kind of block it out in some way. Take the positive feedback you get, take the constructive criticism you might get, but if someone's just not getting it the way that others are, focus on the people that are getting it, and they're going to help you get better. Because not everyone likes all genres. For instance, there's some genres people just are not going to connect with and are going to just attack you for. And then obviously when you're not in a class environment, when you're in a more broad writers group, if you know these people, generally you can trust them to give you more gentle feedback, just like Susan said.
Constructive.
Yeah, constructive, yeah.
So yeah, getting that constructive feedback. How is everyone, I know that your publishers are helping with the marketing piece. What is it that you're doing specifically in the pandemic, not being able to have the in-person book launches and those kinds of things to market your books? And anyone can start on this. So what are you doing to market your books? And perhaps if you were with publishers that maybe didn't have a strong marketing component to them, what would you do to market the book?
So yeah, my book was published by a small press that did not have, much or any marketing budget. They definitely were helpful in giving me advice. And it all happened during the pandemic, so any book signings all went out the window. But the thing that they told me to do that worked really well was to use everyone to get the word out to not only, obviously the people that you're close to, they're going to buy your book no matter what, but to get them to tell their friends, maybe their friend has a teenage boy who might be interested in your genre. And that's the way to get it out, because I don't know that many teenagers who might be reading YA, but friends of mine have teenagers, and things like that. It kind of goes that way. And then the other thing is you have to use social media. My publisher got my book out to a lot of Instagram reviewers and Twitter reviewers and people with blogs that review a lot of books, and they got free copies and gave great reviews, and then they spread it around to their readers. So those two ways were kind of the best, most effective for me when there was no in-person ability.
Yeah, I think there's a really good catch there. Most times a publisher will give you the opportunity to contribute to your publicity list. And that's when you want to go through all of your contacts and figure out who is, and the thing is that the great thing about going to an MFA, you never know who you went to school with who will suddenly become a reviewer at somewhere very big. I got very lucky in that way, right? Like we met 10 years ago and now they're a reviewer for a solid publication. And when I have a book come out, they're excited about it. So you really want to comb your contacts. And then you also want to look at people who review books that are similar to yours, right? Like I tend to sit next to Carmen Maria Machado on a shelf. So I went and looked at everyone who reviewed her book. They went on our publicity list. I think that this level of legwork is required of any author, no matter how big your publisher is, because if you know in your mind specifically, like you should have 5 or 6 publications that you're like, it's my goal to get reviewed here, and then figure out who at those places you would want to send a book to. I've reached out to a couple of reviewers myself. Like that's how I landed in Bustle. Like I really did the legwork, and they had their whole publicity arm going for me, but I still added to that because it's kind of, you can never do too much about when a book is coming out. That is really the way that I looked at it. One thing that also helped me, there's a website called Canva where you can create your own graphics for social media. And I took my book cover, like a piece of it, and I would put all my blurbs, all my positive reviews on it, and made it very Instagram friendly, big fonts, right? And in the months leading up to publication, I would roll one of those out a week, and that did a ton for me. Like it started getting reviewers to pay attention to me. It started getting people really excited about the book. It built mystery. That was something that, and I think even if you go to a big publisher, creating a little bit of a social media campaign for yourself that looks really good is totally worth the effort. Make it polished, make it pretty. People are superficial, so just play into that a little.
I think the visuals are very important, and it's called Canva, Canva.
Yeah, and you can upload any photo you want and then kind of put a pretty font over it, and you can put whatever words you want. So make it simple, make it crisp, make it look fancy. You can't do too much to promote your own work. It's like really true. You're the engine of your book. Your publisher is going to do a lot, but you are the heart and soul. I was lucky my book came out before the pandemic, and so I already kind of went through the whole thing, and I feel bummed for writers right now because going to bookstores and being able to connect with people is such a huge part of this experience. But I do love the fact that we do these Zoom events and suddenly we can be in conversation with people who are not, like usually on a book tour, someone has to be in the same city as you at the same time, which is super, super hard to wrangle. And now I'm like doing events with people that, you know, we're never in the same city at the same time. So that part is kind of nice. And the attendance on virtual events tends to be like pretty high compared to in-store. So, you know, checks and balances.
So we have a few minutes left. And let me see if we kind of covered all the questions. And do we have any final questions from the audience? Let's see here. I think we kind of went through most of the questions. I think we can kind of touch on who are your favorite authors personally, and any useful craft books that you would suggest to writers, and just kind of let the audience know where they would be able to get your book. So whoever wants to start.
I can start. For useful craft books, I'm going to recommend Save the Cat. For those that have not heard of this, this is a Save the Cat is a method of story plotting that was originally developed for screenwriters. And my most valuable piece of advice for writers is to teach yourself the difference between good writing and good storytelling. Those are two completely different things. So good writing to me is like putting together a beautiful sentence, right? And good storytelling is a different skill. It's, you know, how do you make the audience interested in your main character, and how do you build suspense, you know, as you go through a story. And I found this book really helpful for that second part, for the storytelling part of it. It helped me edit my book, and this one's Save the Cat specifically for novel writers. And the other one is this one. It's called Take Off Your Pants by Libby Hawker. And this is for those of you like me who don't necessarily make an outline. So I think the reason it took me so long to write my first book is because I kind of just winged it. I just, you know, wrote a little bit, you know, every few days, and it kind of came together. But I would not recommend that because it takes so darn long. So this is a good sort of like how to outline your novel type of book, and it's really slim and easy to read. And then places you can get my book, basically anywhere you buy books, preferably your local independent bookstore, but also at any major book retailer.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'll go next if you want, and then we can end on Bill. I outline everything. So I do I get a giant piece of poster board for every chapter, outline what's supposed to happen. I do the arc thing, the characters, the scenes I want. I love the 90-day novel, and then Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott is always great if you just need a kick in the pants. If you're dragging your feet on drafting, that's one of my absolute favorites. I still go back to that. And then my book is available everywhere that books are sold. I would also recommend Go Indie. Bookshop.org is a great place to get books. I really agree so much with what Madi said. Plot, it is fine. It is wonderful if you are great at writing a sentence. If you can't handle plot, you're kind of stopped in the water. And so I think looking towards screenplay writing, looking at the structure of, the climax, everything, that stuff is so important to learn, and it will make your job so much easier. The more you can outline a little, and when I do like a master class, I'll talk about that as like leaving yourself places to rest as you climb the mountain, right? You don't need to plot out everything that happens in the book, but you want some posts that you can stop at and go, like, I got here, now I just got to get up there. And other things can happen along the way, but if you don't have these major plot points out, it's just going to take you longer. And to be honest, that's what the agents are going to tell you anyway. You're going to send it out and they're going to come back and be like, I want you to fix the plot. And I will tell you that this last book, I did the new novel that I'm working on now, I did way more outlining, and basically like, we're going to go try to sell it in like a month. Like it has shortened my time to turn around so fast. So definitely plot.
Bill?
Yeah, so I do not outline. Not that I disagree with Sarah's comments that it probably makes things a lot easier. I will say, yeah, after my first drafts, then it becomes more evident that, oh, okay, I'm missing a whole part here that isn't clear at all. But that's kind of the way I do it. The book, one of the books I've read a lot of books on writing, and I'm trying to remember some of them, but I know one of the ones that I have read a couple times is Stephen King's on writing. It is really specific about how to cut out the unnecessary parts of your story. I tend to be a little long-winded in my writing, and I always have to remember, do you really need this sentence or this paragraph or this diversion? Does it add anything to the plot? Does it add anything to the story or the characters? Or is it just there because you wanted to write that neat little scene or that neat little paragraph? So I find that very useful. My book is similarly on sale everywhere you can buy books. I don't have a copy with me because I'm on vacation today.
Oh, nice.
Nice. This is true author lifestyle.
Love it.
No days off. No days off.
The beach is beckoning, but I am doing a lot of writing while I'm here.
Awesome.
Well, panel, thank you so much. This was an amazing breakout session. And again, their books are available anywhere books are sold. Thank you, audience members, for attending. We really appreciate you being here. And have a good rest of the conference, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.